Welcome to Fixation Station, the podcast about obsessions. Today, we're going to be talking about Theranos with the comedian and author of the upcoming book, out May 3rd. I'm more dateable than a plate of refried beans, Ginny Hogan.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm so happy to discuss Theranos with you.
Yeah, no, it'll be fun. I feel like this is a cultural phenomenon, but when did you first find out about Theranos?
I think I jumped on the bandwagon early. So
Okay.
I worked in the tech industry and I read like John Carreyrou's like original articles about it, his like Wall Street Journal takedown and his book Bad Blood. But I actually knew of Elizabeth Holmes back when she was like a girl boss. I remember like friends sending me an article when she was on the cover of Fortune being like, this lady is fucking awesome. I think I thought she was cool at the time. And one of my friends in college like had hooked up with the whistleblower. So like when he was like in the news, I was like, oh my God, Rachel was that guy from like the Catholic Big Party. And I just thought it was all really interesting. And I do think I got on the bandwagon before everyone else. And then I think I burned out on it, but then I'm now back into it because the Hulu show is so good. Have you been watching it?
I haven't. I'm not. So they don't have Hulu in Amsterdam, but they have a lot of the biggest Hulu shows are on Disney Plus. But I've just been too busy rewatching How I Met Your Mother.
I get it.
I will watch it. I'm a big fan of Amanda. It's good to see her back.
Incredible. I'm obsessed with her. I think Elizabeth Holmes is pretty cool, but watching the show, like it got me into the podcast. So I listened to the Dropout podcast and it goes through the whole story and then it goes through the whole trial, and the trial season is so good. And just they need to do a second episode of the show that's just the trial basically. Now I'm following Sunny's trial. Sunny is her like ex-boyfriend / ex-COO.
Right. And
He's
nobody who worked at the company at the time knew that they were dating, right?
Right. It was totally a secret. I still can't believe they were dating. She's just way out of his league. I know that he was an abusive boyfriend, so I'm sure that there was manipulation involved. Yeah, that part is very serious.
Right. Yeah. So my
Experience with Elizabeth Holmes was I listened to the first season of The Dropout
when it came out, but I have sort of just, I think Inventing Anna was too long and I burned out.
Okay. I am on episode 2 of Inventing Anna, and I only care about the journalist. I don't care about Anna's story. And I think truly like New York society is just not interesting to me. So like, it's not interesting why she would like fraud, defraud people to get in there. Whereas like Silicon Valley, I think it's kind of interesting to me, which is why I love The Dropout.
Yeah, I can totally see. Also, just if Inventing Anna had been 5 episodes, it would have been fine. But spoiler alert for the 9th episode, her lawyer's family vacation is a huge plot point.
Wow. Okay. His wife is like a famous actress. I feel like that's sometimes like a giveaway on TV shows when their wife is someone like identified, or like there's like a minor character who's like a big name actor and you're like, oh, this character is going to have to be doing something wild later on.
Yeah. It's not even wild though.
Okay.
She just wants to go on vacation.
Some people do, some people love it. Okay.
But anyway, I guess I have been assuming that people are aware of Theranos, and I think that's a fair assumption. Do you want to do a quick recap for people who might not be?
Okay, totally. Yeah. So Theranos was this tech startup in San Francisco, and it got started like 2003, and it kind of was shut down by like 2018. It was started by this like 19-year-old Stanford dropout, Elizabeth Holmes. And their premise was that they were going to like test people's blood for diseases with just 1 drop of blood. And they were going to like be way more efficient than existing blood testing systems. She got a ton of big scientists, a ton of really big investors, and a ton of press. And she was like on the cover of all these magazines. She's also this like hot blonde lady, super young, was kind of like the alternate nerdy tech guys was like Elizabeth Holmes. And then it sort of slowly came out that she was lying about the effectiveness of her technology. And at first it was like, oh, she lied about a few things. And then it kind of became clear that the whole company was a fraud. They were like using other people's machines. They were falsifying all their data. In an investor report, put the names of different drug companies on the documents to basically like forged documents to say that like Pfizer had approved of their methods or whatever. And then she went to trial and she got convicted of defrauding investors, and she's awaiting right now. And she's like a huge cultural phenomenon because she has a specific look, I think. Like she like tries to dress like Steve Jobs. And like there are all these photos of in a black turtleneck with like black eyeliner, like holding like a tiny little droplet of blood or like a little vial of blood. And that's like sort of like her iconic image. And she was just sort of like, yeah, I mean, I feel like people are obsessed with her for a while. And then so she was already so famous by the time it became clear that her company was fraudulent. And for that reason, the investigation and the company going down in flames, that became a huge story too.
And a lot of her investors were old men Republicans, right?
Totally. I mean, yeah, it was like George Shultz, who was like Reagan's Secretary of State or something. And then like Henry Kissinger, like it like felt like, yeah, like a lot of like Department of Defense, like war hawk people. She also lied and said that the military was using her technology and they were not. Yeah, she just like really brazenly lied. I don't know. I'm like mixed because she's a huge fraud, but I do think she's like cool in some ways. Like, yeah, I just think she just really went for it. And like, I feel like she is kind of an example of, it's like, like women like Sheryl Sandberg are like, oh, to succeed in business, women need to act like men. And like, that's the secret to success. And Elizabeth Holmes just took it and ran with it and went way too far. She was like, okay, I'll just invent an entire company and be super confident about it. And yeah.
I think her biggest mistake is that she decided to go into biomedical technology rather than just programming, because Amazon made no money for like decades until they stumbled on the cloud.
Yes. Yeah.
And people just were like, eventually it'll make money. Let's just give you more money to do it. But like, when you're running medical.
That's the thing, is you can't just lie about medicine. Like I do feel what's interesting is in the trial, the only people who were like, she was found guilty of defrauding investors, but not defrauding patients. And I'm like, actually, like I have way more sympathy for the patients. Like I don't think a patient who gets a blood test should be responsible investigating if the blood test is from a reliable company. But I do think an investor should be, like a lot of the investors really did just kind of ignore really obvious red flags.
My understanding, like they weren't running bad tests on blood. They were just running old blood tests and pretending it was new, right? That was basically.
Yes, they were using old machines.
Right. Must have been so confusing because they must have been drawing. They tell the patient, this is a new test. We need less blood, but we're going to keep drawing.
Yeah. There were a lot of times where like they had to use a needle and then like came up with some reason for why they needed the needle, because it was supposed to just be like a thumb prick. There were times though where the test results were completely wrong, and like either like they were using the legacy systems incorrectly because they didn't have enough blood, so they diluted it with water. Oh, wow. Or like they were trying to use their own machines and their own machines were like super inaccurate.
No, like that is probably the worst thing. That I don't care that she took Henry Kissinger's money.
Yeah.
Like at all.
Yeah. And they tried to have like in the trial, like they didn't have that many people with like super intense, really dramatic stories, because it was usually just like they got a wild result and then they got their blood tested like a regular way. Like I think the system was so new that doctors didn't even really trust it anyways. There was no one, at least they didn't have story. Like there was a woman who like said that like a Theranos test showed that she had miscarried, and she was so emotional about it that she was considering or it showed that she was about to miscarry. And she was like considering ending the pregnancy anyway to avoid the pain of that. But then she wasn't about to miscarry. But it's like no doctor was actually going to not double check the results of, you know what I mean? Like her doctor then like looked at what was going on.
Yeah. So, but it's still like you shouldn't have to go through that at all.
Yeah. Right. No, I agree. Yeah. It was hard. I mean, there were a lot of the stories that really got to me most were like people who like thought they had cancer for a week. You know, like that's horrible. Like. Yeah, that to me was the most fucked up. But I also like I didn't really have that much sympathy for investors who just super wanted to believe her. So like really didn't do their research.
Right.
You know?
Because I can't remember. I think it was Greg Schultz, but I could be wrong. There's one of them whose grandkid was working at the company and was like telling this investor, this company is not what you think it is. And they believed Elizabeth Holmes over their grandkid.
Yes, that's the one my friend hooked up with, the grandkid. I always thought he was really hot. And then in the show, he's played by the kid from 13 Reasons Why, who like I also find pretty hot, even though he's like, wait, actually, he's probably not that much younger than me, but the character is way younger than me.
Yeah. I'm sure for like labor rights laws, that also works for it's okay to be attractive.
He's fine. Yeah, I'm sure he's like probably like mid-20s. It's fine.
Yeah, it's totally
yeah.
fair. Yeah, I do think I haven't watched the show, but I've seen the actor they've cast as Sonny, and I think he's too hot.
He's definitely too hot to be Sonny. Yeah. Well, Amanda Seyfried's super hot. I think Elizabeth Holmes is pretty hot, but Elizabeth Holmes to me is very like generic looking, and there are kind of a lot of actresses who look like her, whereas Amanda Seyfried is pretty like unique. I think it has like a more unique look. So I do think that they could have cast someone who looked way more like her, but I think Amanda Seyfried is so good that it like works anyway.
Yeah, I mean, people on television are almost hotter than
you have to
really.
You have to. That would be so like, can you imagine how offensive it would be if they made a biopic of you and the actor was less hot? Like, I would be horrified.
Would be devastating. Sorry, did you watch The People versus OJ? Because
so good.
Yeah, it was very good. But I think the one confusing thing about that is I think now blanking on the actor who played OJ.
Oh, Cuba Gooding Jr.
Yeah, I think Cuba Gooding Jr. is less handsome than OJ, and then everybody else is hotter than the person they were playing. So it occasionally they'd be like, "He's so handsome." And be like,
interesting. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I do think
not that Cuba Gooding Jr. isn't hot, but OJ.
But so is OJ. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard if the actual person is really hot. Like in Inventing Anna, I do think the actress is hotter, but like the actual Anna Delvey's pretty hot too.
Right.
You know?
I think that it's fine.
Yeah.
The casting of the show was fine. It's just too many.
The two, yeah.
At a certain point, we're like, we get it. She's pretending to be someone she isn't. In order to get money, like we understand. But because Sonny was just like a schlubby guy who was like 20 years older than her.
So much older. Yeah, when they met, she was 18 and he was like 37.
That there was like a list of things that he had written to her about how she should behave.
Yes. Okay. The text between the two of them are insane because they're really like, spiritual, kind of like woo-woo. And they send each other a lot of texts about how they're like praying and like, he calls her his tigress, and like a lot of, you have to sit and meditate on this for like an hour. And yeah, he was really controlling. He was controlling about what she wore. He was controlling about what she ate. He believed that for her to like have enough energy to stay awake for like 20-hour days, she like could only eat like very simple foods. And she drank this like really gross green juice. He was controlling. He like wouldn't let her see her family because he said like she didn't have time for that. Yeah, he was like really abusive and controlling.
Yeah, it's tough because it's also like she was definitely at fault. Like she knew what was going on. But like I would occasionally see tweets being like, oh, she's just trying to blame it on this like rant, and it's like he also knew what was
totally yeah. One of the things I think is super interesting about this story is that the gender dynamics go both ways. Like when they were discussing the jury selection, like they didn't even really know if they wanted more men or more women on the jury to keep defending her, because they thought women might sympathize with her, the girl bossiness, which is kind of why I would be more likely to sympathize with her. Not the girl bossiness, but more like, okay, she had to compete in like a very male dominated field. I get why she might have gotten carried away with the lying. But then they also thought that men might be more likely to sympathize with her because men would be like, oh, maybe she just didn't know what was going on, So right. It was like, they wanted it both ways, basically. On the show, the kid kind of is trying to defend her before he's like ready to be the whistleblower. And his lab partner is like, oh, you think that just because she's a woman, she doesn't know what's going on at her own company? And it is like, they basically like both sides can use gender against her.
Right. Yeah. And she definitely was aware of it.
Totally aware.
I also think her hair is very interesting.
Yeah, on the show or in general?
I haven't watched the show, so in general.
Okay, right.
Because like it seems very, again, I don't know her. I can't see inside her mind. But if it is intentional, it's like the perfect amount of like blonde to communicate I'm like hot, but like the perfect amount of not perfectly tousled, like you can see roots. She often hasn't like combed it, so she's like being like, I'm hot, but I also don't care that much about my hair.
Yeah. I think I have a theory about her appearance, which is that like she actually doesn't care about her appearance at all, and she's trying to do the bare minimum, or like she's kind of like I think in her mind she's like, I'm trying really hard with my hair, and that's like the best she can do. Because she thinks that that's enough, basically, but it's not in her nature to think about hair. At least that's what the TV shows trying to make it out like she's like really frumpy, and then enough people are like, you have to try to look good, that she's like, okay, I'll do like the bare minimum basically.
Right.
But
yeah. But it communicates like a lot, whether it's
totally
intentional or not.
Yeah.
And then there's the voice, of course, too.
What do you think of the voice? Yeah.
It's hard because I feel like women really can't win because
I agree.
Like when I was growing up, our voices were too high, and now we try and do the like vocal fry thing, and people are like, oh my God, I can't stand vocal fry either. And I don't think every time she used it, she was consciously like, let me turn on my male voice. But I definitely also think she was aware that she was trying. For people who don't know, her voice definitely fluctuates a lot. And when in context where one would want to seem more serious, her voice gets lower and more monotone. Is that a good way of describing it?
Definitely. Yeah. And like she like does this like weird deep voice that like kind of came on suddenly. Like she like used to speak normally, and then she just start like, I'll try to do it like Theranos. I don't know. I'm not doing it. Theranos, we're changing the world with our. No, I don't know. I don't sound like her, but you get the idea. She like just dropped her voice a couple octaves.
Yeah, that is. Yeah. So what's your take on the voice?
It makes it really easy to make fun of her. I mean, she has a couple of things about her that just make her like iconic, and that's one of them. And I think that she's an interesting example of how like being iconic goes both ways, because it got her really famous and then it made everyone really interested in the downfall. Whereas I feel like there are other companies that totally go under in a huge fashion and no one cares outside of Silicon Valley, you know? Like
Enron was probably a much bigger scam, but like there's not going to be a Hulu.
Right.
It's all about these like individual scams is what we're not into. It's like
personality.
Like Firefest inventing it. It's all Joe the
Tiger. Yeah, you need like a face. You know, like everyone knows way more about Facebook than they do about Google. And I just think Mark Zuckerberg kind of made himself like a notable asshole. And the Google that like Google does so many shady things too.
Right.
But no one knows anything about their leadership. So like no one really cares. Whereas like Facebook is like Mark Zuckerberg's like the face of Facebook, and like every like detail about what he was like in college has like come to light. Like if people get attached to the leader of a company, they want to follow the whole story.
Yeah, for sure. Like the YouTube algorithm is, I think, probably of all of the tech algorithms, probably the one that most directly led people who would not have become alt-right to become alt-right. And yet nobody ever really talks about them. Like everybody always talks about Facebook Russian misinformation, which I'm also not a fan of. But the fact that YouTube like very consciously was like, oh, they're watching a philosophy video, let's show them like Nazi. Yeah. But so that's a thing, because I'm less plugged into Silicon Valley than you are, but it seems like with the advent of all of these scams, there's much less conversation about like how every tech needs to save the world.
Yeah, I think her efforts to save, I mean, like it is a bummer because I do think she was well-intentioned, and it's kind of because she said that she was saving the world that she got so much like investment, and I think people are just getting more realistic. I don't know.
Right.
Like,
I mean, I say that like the crypto people definitely think
they do. Yeah. There's definitely a lot. I feel like I see a lot of tweets about how like they're getting money to Ukrainians via crypto, and I'm like, it's also low-key propping up the Russian government, but like whatever, you know what I mean? Like goes both ways. That's the thing about money, is that you can give it to anybody, right? You know? It's like yeah.
And it would also be like wild if somebody was like, oh my God, you guys, money is such a great invention. We like,
I know. Oh my God. You don't. Okay, this was so insane, but I'm like such a troll on Twitter. So there is, I don't know if you saw the Time magazine cover of Vitalik Buterin, who's like the founder of Ethereum, and he's strange looking, but I do think he's kind of hot. But most people think he's strange.
He's my
he's your type. Okay, we have the same type. Nice. Hi, Vitalik. You ladies here in Europe. But so many people were making fun of his appearance, and then he posted like a joke with like screen grabs of all the different people calling him like Tom Brady on meth. And I commented, I'm such a troll, but I was like, don't worry, Vitalik, I think you're hot. Too bad you're so into crypto though. And there were all these guys who were like, That's such a fucked up thing to say. Crypto is just money. Like, would you say like, too bad you're so into money? And I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
It's so embarrassing to be into money. Are you kidding me? Like, yes, I would say that.
It would be more embarrassing.
No, it is less embarrassing to be into crypto because at least you can be like, I'm interested in the technology.
It should be a tool. Not, like I like buying things. I want to be clear.
Yeah, no, I like when people give me money and I like to use them in exchange for goods. I'm just saying, I think that there are a few examples off the top of my head in which money has been used in bad ways. You know? So like it cuts both ways.
Yeah. Just a couple.
Yeah. But like the crypto people are so, I mean, I don't know, I have a million thoughts on it, but it's like their whole premise is that it's like unregulated and the governments can't touch it. And I'm like, yeah, if that's the point, then that means that you can give it to anybody. Like it can be, I don't know. It's like,
I also just think I don't really understand what blockchain is, but I understand that it will have applications to make tools for us in the future that have the potential to be cool. But like, I just think like if blockchain is going to be like root of the internet, it'll just, it feels like we're pre.com bubble right now in terms of blockchain, right? Where it's like, yes, there are very cool applications for it, but that doesn't mean like every application for it is cool.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. We're like, it'll take some time to like shake out and figure out.
Yeah, well, you just let it happen. Why do you have to keep proving to me that? That's
such a good point. That's what I'm going to say to any, like, I feel like I meet a lot of crypto guys to just be like, listen, if the blockchain becomes cool, I'll know. I'm on the internet all day. Like, I will know if it's useful.
Right. Like, you don't need to pay Paris Hilton to pretend that she likes that ugly picture of a monkey.
Yes. Yeah.
So is Elizabeth Holmes going to jail? I haven't even been following enough to know this.
She's being sentenced in September. Okay. I mean, there are a few other fascinating things about Elizabeth Holmes. In the time after Theranos collapse, she got married to like a young, hot hotel heir who like people think that he married her because like he thinks it's sort of funny and like kind of like a funny bit, which like I would like someone to marry me as a bit, I guess. Like, I don't know. Like he just thinks it's notable. I mean, she's definitely like a notable person.
Right. It's definitely, you have stuff to talk about at a dinner.
Right. Yeah. And she is hot. Like maybe it's like sexual. I don't know. I'm sure that they have sex, but they had a child, which like, you know, she's like in her late 30s and I understand, but I think it's crazy to have a child when you might go to jail. But I also think she maybe felt like she wouldn't be able to have a child after jail. You know what I mean? Like if she goes to jail for 10 years, she's going to miss that, you know, probably her fertility window will close. Who knows? But that is like a wild choice still. I think it's an interesting one though. I feel like people were so critical of it. And I'm like, firstly, I don't really think it's like super fair to be critical of someone for choosing to have a baby.
I think like the whole prospect of giving birth is so wild to me that I think everybody, if you're choosing to create like this other being, that in and of itself is just like a wild thing to do. And that I think we just got to let people do.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I don't think, like choosing to have a baby right before you go to jail is not that much crazier than just choosing to have a baby. Yeah. They're both crazy things to do.
And it's great. Like, I want humanity to continue.
I was listening to a Full Husky podcast where they compared having a baby to becoming a vampire.
I mean, it is true that someone starts like sucking your tits, you know?
The point more like to become a parent is to become like a fundamentally different kind of person, and so you can't really make like you can't know what being a parent is like before you're a parent, so deciding to be a parent is like a leap of faith in much the same way like you can't really know what it is like to be a vampire. So choosing to be I did not come up with, I'll link the podcast the show notes.
I'm into it. I think that this sounds like an apt comparison.
Yeah. So I also just think, all people should be allowed to have children, regardless. There was, at least when they first got married, there was some suspicion that it was like also maybe like a workaround for her to get back into business, right? Because he started a company and she's not allowed to. But I don't know if
probably. Yeah. I think also his family pays her legal fees, or I don't know. I think it's a mix of like some Theranos insurance pays her legal fees, which is a little strange, but yeah, he's like an heir. So I think that a lot of it is his family too.
Oh, okay. I'll marry an heir.
Yeah, totally. If I am gonna start a company and then get arrested for fraud, I'm gonna marry an heir. That seems like the smart thing to do.
Yeah. Not to go back to Anna Delvey, but the thing I don't understand right now is that she got out of jail for the fraud, but she wants to stay in America, so she like went right back into like ICE holding. I've never been to jail, but I would rather just live in Germany.
Yeah.
I don't really understand the appeal of like of living in America, that it's worth being imprisoned for longer.
I think potentially part of why I'm not that into her show or her story in general is like her motivation is not super clear to me. And it's not, I know she has a motivation, but that life is unappealing to me. So I'm sort of like, the idea of living in a hotel just doesn't appeal, or like going to like an art gallery. Like I just would never go to an art gallery, so like that's whereas like, so I don't understand like lying and risking going to jail to like be a big person in like the art scene.
Okay, yeah, I can
like
see
take
that.
a big, like I don't know, I don't like to like really travel, and if I do, I like it to be like low key. Like the idea of like clubbing is like just not for me. So I don't. But she clearly has way different motivations than I do, obviously. Whereas Elizabeth Holmes, I get the appeal of like starting a really big company. And I think I'm probably more of an Elizabeth Holmes apologist than most people, but like, I do think that for a really long time, she really thought that she was going to turn things around and like the technology would work out and it wouldn't matter that she lied a little because it, came out fine. And I really think that she like thought her technology was going to be really helpful and good. And then she just, went too far and the technology didn't work out and she wasn't willing to admit that she was wrong. But I think that a lot of it, like, I think it came from like a deep desire to like actually change the world and it just.
No, I definitely think, again, maybe I'm more of an apologist, but I think it's pretty clear that she was trying to fake it till you make it. And then.
Yeah.
Just like, but she was trying to fake like she was trying to alter the way like humans sell.
Right, you can't fake science. I mean, they like discuss that in the show. Like someone says fake it till you make it, and this like older female scientist is like, that's horrible advice. People need to stop saying that, which like is kind of true. Like I actually think I believe that it works in a lot of fields, and I still think it's kind of bad advice.
Yeah, no, even if it does work, like it shouldn't work. Like the system is set up incorrectly. I will say she did get early. One, she was at Stanford as an undergrad. She did, because this is another interesting like gender dynamics, is she went to like one scientist, and I can't remember the details, but she went to a woman professor at Stanford and was like, I want to do this. And that woman was like, the properties of blood will not allow you to do this.
Yes. Yeah.
And then she just, instead of taking that in, she just like found a male professor.
Yes, that is true. She did alter her thing from the original business plan, but I think that part of the TV show actually is really powerful. It's basically like she accuses the female professor of like not supporting women, and the professor is like, yeah, it's really great. And the professor's like, as a woman, I'm telling you don't get to skip steps. Like this is right. Like the best advice I can give you as a woman is that you can't just like cut to the front of the line. Like science is slow and you have to learn everything before you get started. And basically like kind of says the thing that everyone ends up saying about her, which she's like, it is going to make all women look bad if you try to like do this badly. Like as a woman, you have to do things better basically. And then that ends up being like so much of like the takedown of Elizabeth Holmes is people being like, oh, bummer. Like we finally had this like cool female CEO and she was a fraud. And I do think it probably makes it harder for women to raise money, especially like in the same field. And
and it was already pretty hard to begin with.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's also interesting. I'm going to bring up Enron again. Are you familiar at all with what happened to Enron? Because I think you're slightly younger. And
I actually, after this, I got really into like fraud in general. So I'm just now learning about Enron, but it is interesting to me because I listened to the You're Wrong about Enron, and it kind of seems like so dumb. Like they were just able to like totally fake their financials, but I think I need to learn more about it.
Right. I mean, so again, it's been a while, and now I'm thinking about it. I think most of what I've learned was actually in like a positive psychology book about the growth mindset. But like one of the points that book was making, which I think is, I'll look up to see if remembering the book, but I think it was a Sean Acorn book, like The Happiness Experiment.
Yeah.
But like, so Enron was very tied to McKinsey.
Future Ariel here. I know it's pronounced McKinsey. I don't know what's going on there. I'm sorry.
And McKinsey is a consulting firm, and like the thesis of McKinsey is the idea that you don't have to be an expert in anything, you just have to be smart.
Totally.
And there are a lot of problems with that philosophy, but one of the problems is if you tie your success to your identity, then it becomes harder to admit. Like if you think I'm a smart person, that's why I'm successful, and then it turns out that you make a mistake or you're not good at something, that instead of just like admitting you made a mistake and moving on, you can't admit that a mistake was made, because then you have to because then that means you're not smart, and to be smart is the best thing in the world. And there was like a lot of that philosophy like going on at Enron at the time. And I think there's also probably an element of that philosophy involved in Elizabeth. She wanted to be a billionaire, which wanting to start a company I can relate to. Wanting to be a billionaire, I do think is a red flag.
Yeah, you just have to do so many bad things to get there. I think, I don't know. I do think.
Yeah, and it's just, you don't need that much money.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
Just give it away, like at a certain point. But also the idea that it is like a title that conveys some sort of like meaning. And I think her idea of herself as this person who was going to be like 1 in a million and super successful, again, she probably was a little bit delusional.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Right. And like you need some amount of delusion. And I feel like like she was probably told that she needed some amount of delusion. Like, did you listen to like the WeWork podcast?
No.
There's like this investor who's like, how crazy are you? And the guy's like, I'm pretty crazy. And he's like, you need to be crazier or something. Like, I feel like they tell founders that you just need to be like fully insane or you'll like never make it through. And it's like, yeah, that's why people act this way. I don't know.
Yeah. But yeah. It's also like, I mean, we're both comedians. And I think
we're delusional.
Yeah.
You have to be delusional to be a comedian.
100%. And I do think sometimes it's very easy to fall prey to the survivorship bias, right?
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Like they'll be like, Steve Harvey was living in his car and then he like got the phone call that changed his life. And it's like, yeah, but like there are also lots of people who just continue living in their car and you just don't know their name.
Yeah. Did you read Sally Rooney's latest book, Beautiful World, Where Are You?
No, I haven't yet.
Okay, it kind of reminds me of her other books, but there's one line that really sticks with me that's like, our culture is so deeply sick, or like first she says like you have to be so deeply sick to want to be famous, like to like make all the compromises you have to make to be famous, go through all the hurdles and give up your privacy and everything. And then she says, and our culture is so deeply sick because these are the people that we revere, you know, like it's like even like crazier than just the individuals wanting to be famous, but that like when they do it, we want to live like them, you know, like that's what's so crazy.
Yeah. I think there's also a problem with a lot of the most successful people are workaholics and they've just like
definitely
set up the system and they like where we all now have to like work that hard in order to succeed.
Yeah.
And
And a lot of the most successful people are really lucky, or they lie, or
right. And it's such a, I was watching Jim Gaffigan on Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. They did not have good chemistry at all, but it was so interesting. At one point, Jim Gaffigan says something about how they are lucky, and Seinfeld he's not yelling or anything, but he's so offended. But he's like, I worked so hard and I was so talented, and I believe those things are true, but they're also there's luck involved in life, and if you can't handle the idea that is true, there's something deeply wrong with you. I don't know how, even as simple as being born in fucking America at the second half of the 20th century. Do you think do you think it's just a coincidence that most of the worldwide famous comedians are from America? Because that's just where all of the funny people happen.
Do you think it's in the water that they just get funnier there?
Yeah, exactly. It's just again, if you tie your identity to this, I think it becomes a harder.
Right. And I think there's also this crazy idea that being famous will make you happy. And what I think is wild is that I don't think any famous person would endorse that. I feel like famous people are always just remember, it's not going to make you happy. And everyone's like, okay, joke's on you. We know better,
Right. I'll spend a lot of time thinking about exactly how famous I was.
How famous do you want to be?
Well, yeah. So I used to say I wanted to be exactly as famous as John Mulaney, but now I've decided I want to be significantly less.
Significantly less famous.
I did not realize how many people knew who he was until the very.
I don't have a good sense of who's famous outside of. I don't know. Yeah, I don't really know who's famous.
It's also the term is with the internet is just sort of. Everybody lives in their own cocoon, and it's not there are 3 channels and we know everybody watches one show at 6
right Saturday.
Yeah. It's even funny, Amanda Palmer is on TikTok right now. I don't know. I
don't know who that is. So she could be way more famous. She could be the most famous person in the world, and I might not know her if she's on TikTok.
Okay, so see, this is proving my point. Okay, so I'm gonna start. What is it in media res? This woman, Amanda Palmer, she's a musician, and she did a truly terrible cover of Under Pressure from Encanto.
Oh man, okay.
So she's just yelling a lot, and she's like, oh, you guys can't handle the emotionality. And it's no, that song is about pretending you're fine when you're not fine. So if you're screaming, it deprives it of emotion. You've misunderstood the point. But then there are all of these defenders of her who are about my age who are you don't understand how big she was back in the day. And I was she wasn't that. I knew who she was because she had TED Talk. I'm actually realizing there's a fraud element involved.
Whoa, I'm gonna look this up.
So she was a musician, and she was a working musician in a very alternative scene. Some of this information I have I've watched explainers of elder millennials on TikTok being I'm gonna explain who Amanda Palmer is to the young people, and I'm I was around for this and I had no idea. But she was an alternative independent musician. She had a dark cabaret act where she pretended to be a Siamese twin, which I had never heard of. But I became familiar with her after she had sort of built up a career, because she had a TED Talk about how people want to give you money. Basically, she was one of the first people on Patreon, and she was if you want to create art, you should ask people to support your art, and people really want to do that. And there was some criticism because she's like a very like conventionally attractive white lady. And maybe she was like talking about how she started off busking, and she's like, oh, people were always like very generous. And it's like, yeah, you were like a 22-year-old like blonde.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily like, anyway, indicative of how everybody experiences the world. And she also had rich parents to fall back on if it like hadn't worked out, this sort of thing. And then I might be getting the order of this wrong, but I think after the TED Talk, she had a Kickstarter, and she was like originally asking for like 100,000, but like she got, I think, at least 1 million.
Wow.
And then she like put out a call for musicians to work on that album for free.
Oh wow.
And then
okay.
After people like were like, hey, you got like way more money than you asked for, she was like, fine, I'll pay the musicians who work on this project.
Good, yeah.
And then she like married Neil Gaiman, and they have like a weird relationship.
Oh wow. Okay, there's a lot going on here.
They like fled to New Zealand during COVID, and then he like abandoned her there, and now he like has gone back. But anyway, the point being is that she was clearly influential for like a small group of people who are about my age.
Yeah.
And they are now giving people the impression that she was like a huge presence in everyone's life at that time. And she definitely was not.
Yeah. Okay.
This is like such a tangent. I'm
gonna look her up now.
Yeah, the cover is really bad. And there's also, apparently she's done like art projects where she just says like the N-word over and over again. Like she's not, I don't think she's gonna like win over the 14-year-olds, but she can keep trying, I guess. But anyway, so Elizabeth Holmes. So she, how old is her kid now though?
Her kid must be like 6 months maybe.
Oh, okay. And so you think, and she's definitely going to jail. What is your prediction about sentencing?
She might not have to go to jail. She's been found guilty, but maybe she'll get off. But I do think people think she's going to go to jail. And I think that maybe like 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
I don't know what is really working in her favor. I think that, they tried to make a big thing out of her being in an abusive relationship. And I do think that the prosecution did a pretty good job of being like, that may have been true, but this was still fraud, or kind of like, because they didn't want to like dismiss it or say that she was lying. And I don't think she was lying about it. But and I think like, I don't know, but maybe they'll just give her a lighter sentence because I don't really know how the law works, but I think people are thinking that she could go for up to 80 years, but I think that people are thinking it'll be like 3 to 5 years.
I'm also not a lawyer. I think given again, this is another thing that's like terrible about being famous is I think given how high profile it is, I think it would be harder for them to like let her off with like no jail time. But
yes, and I think like it's hard because I feel like there's a part of it where like they're making an example out of her, and it is like I am a little bit bummed that like the first big example of them not being like, there are so many men who lied to their investors, and like I what she did was illegal, but I think that a lot of other.
I mean, Mark Zuckerberg definitely like lied to investors.
The thing is, I think the big issue, honestly, is that the company didn't succeed. Like, I think she could have done all the same things, and if they had turned out a product even after lying about it, and like maybe that is a huge difference, but it doesn't feel like a huge legal difference. Like to me, it's like if lying is against the law, it's against the law, whether or not it, you come up with something later, like, or it's like if she had basically completely abandoned the initial thing she was trying to make and then made something else that succeeded, like I don't think they would have sued her, even though she would have still been telling equal lies about what she had done.
Yeah, basically it seems like they're punishing her for like losing them money.
That's exactly right. And there are parts of when I was listening to like the podcast from the investor meetings, it's like, or from the investors testifying against her, like if you invest in an early stage biotech company, you have to expect you're going to lose money. And a lot of them did. And they like said that like basically angel investing, it's like you give them $5,000 because you think the CEO is like smart and you don't really expect to get it back. But like every once in a while. I don't know. I think that a lot of these investors who didn't look super closely at what Theranos was doing, like weren't touring the labs and stuff, they were taking a risk. They knew they're taking a risk, like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course, like the way it's supposed to work is that they know they're taking a risk, but they've been accurately information to assess the risk they're taking. I don't actually think that's how capitalism works, like at all.
Yeah. I guess like there were times where it just feels like she was definitely trying to trick them, but they could have asked for more clarification or could have like fact checked in a way that maybe, I don't really know how venture capital works, but feels like it would have been like part of the job. Like, okay, so there's like a really big part of the trial where like basically that they say that she falsified documents. And what happened is that like they did studies with Pfizer, and then Theranos wrote up a report about it. And then they put the Pfizer stamp on the study, or they put like the Pfizer logo. And then investors were like, we assumed that this was like sent by Pfizer. And she's like, no, I was just trying to indicate that we had worked with Pfizer on it. And clearly she's trying to trick them. But I also wonder if it's not their job to confirm that was a Pfizer study. Like, I get, maybe not, maybe it's not like, but there's part of me that's like, I know that she's trying to trick them, but I also think everyone trying to raise money from VCs is trying to trick them, Right.
Yeah, for sure. It also reminds me of Greece joining the EU.
Interesting.
Because like, do you know about Greece's like deal with Goldman Sachs?
Not much.
Okay. So basically, like, in order to join, not the EU, the eurozone specifically, in order to join the eurozone, you had to have like under a certain amount of debt. And Greece definitely had more debt than was allowed, but they wanted into the euro. And they made this deal with Goldman Sachs where like basically they would owe money to Goldman Sachs, but they wouldn't call it debt. And then Goldman Sachs would like assess their debt and be like, their debt is under a certain amount. And they like presented this to the other countries and who wanted to join the eurozone. And everybody like at the negotiations, like looking at the paperwork given to them by Goldman Sachs, was like, this is not right. Greece has more debt than it says on this piece of paper. And like they've interviewed a couple of the people who were like at that meeting, and they were like, it would just be too embarrassing to be like, hey, you're lying. We know you're lying.
Yeah.
But I do think that was like a small part of it, but also like if Greece joined the eurozone, then they could sell stuff to Greece from like Germany, and like they wanted to be able to do that. And I think that was probably like a bigger motivator.
Yeah.
And then like when the Great Recession happened and everybody was so mad at Greece, like they were like, oh, you like lied to us, and they were really mad at Goldman Sachs, which like everybody should always be mad at Goldman Sachs.
Yeah.
But it's also like you knew that wasn't true. Like you were pretending.
Yeah.
Because it like suited your needs at the time, not because
definitely.
It's just, and then you just like punish individuals, in this case like a hot lady with a weird voice.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that what she did wasn't bad and that I think it was really traumatic working at the company, but it is like they wanted it to be true, so they believed it. And like again, anybody who for 1 second thought they had cancer when they didn't have cancer. Yeah.
That is like unacceptable. Like
that's what I think is so fucked up is like Theranos didn't get charged on those counts. It was on investor fraud. I'm like, I don't really have that much sympathy for these investors. I get it. Like, the average person is investing.
Like literally funds, but still. Every morning I wake up and I'm upset that Henry Kissinger isn't dead. Like, why would I care? You stole some money from him. And it does seem like Trump also is like lies all the time to investors and is in like so much debt, and it's just like she got caught, and
she got caught. That's the real difference.
And she's weird and hot, like
weird and hot, and there's no place in the world for weird hot liars, I guess.
Unfortunately,
weird hot liars who defraud investors, it's hard. Yeah.
And it's also like, I think that very few people should go to jail as well. Like, I
agree. And obviously I do think white collar criminals should go more often than non-white collar criminals, but I still have some empathy for Elizabeth Holmes. Ultimately, I'm more mad at all the people who haven't gone to jail who probably did similar things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Who are just like more normal and
yeah, less hot.
Yeah. I never did that like
problem.
Weird. What was that? There was a photo from, I think it was like 2012 or something. I can't remember who else. It was like a group of visionaries, and I only remember there was Elizabeth. I'm gonna Google.
That sounds like it could be an iconic photo because it's like the most hated people in the world today. Is it like Mark Zuckerberg, Elizabeth Holmes, Jeff Bezos?
It's Elizabeth Holmes and Lena Dunham, but like a bunch.
Oh my God, this photo sounds incredible.
Yeah, okay. Annie Leibovitz portraits of Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk. Here we go. I don't know who all of the people in this picture are, but we'll figure it out. It's wild. So we've got.
Oh yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, who else is in here?
I don't know who all of these people are, but yeah, JJ Abrams is the wild card for me.
Oh my God, that's Kevin from Instagram. I worked at Instagram briefly.
Oh yeah.
I hate that guy. Lena Dunham.
I do think people's hatred of Lena Dunham is also like a little bit weird, but
yeah, I think it's like, I just feel like a lot of people will do some good things, some bad, like in terms of art creation, some good things, some bad things. And it's just her bad luck that she did her good thing first, you know? Like, otherwise you like build up to it. And by the time you get to the good thing, no one cares about the bad things because you weren't famous at the time. And like, she made a good TV show and then bad things came after. And it's like, if she had done those in the reverse order, that's kind of the issue.
Yeah, but I do also think, yeah, she's like a nepotism person, but like in this scale of like Hollywood, not really.
Right. Yeah. I really did like Girls, but I have seen other things she's affiliated with since then and not like them, but you know, some good things, some bad things. Everyone does both.
Right. Yeah. For sure. Anyway, the picture is wild. Like
that picture is wild. Yeah. So funny.
But yeah, so you worked at Instagram. What did you do at Instagram?
I was a data scientist there very briefly. Okay. I can't even, I've like made PowerPoints. I don't think I did anything interesting. It was back when Instagram was cool, but Facebook was already not cool. So like I would tell people I worked at Instagram and would not click, or like if I told people I worked at Facebook, I'd be like, oh, but it's on Instagram. And they were like, okay, that's good. But like, I mean, now they both are horrible, but
follow me though, not on Facebook, on Instagram. But
I hate social media. Follow me or I will hate you.
Yeah, exactly. Like, please.
Yeah. I hate social media, but all I want is one more follower.
Yes. One more follower and my life will be complete. You made an Audible original.
Yes, it came out in September. It's called Yes We Mustard. It's like actually kind of about like a scandalous tech company. It's not based on Theranos, but I think people now think it is because of the cover art. But it's about like a tech company that's kind of lying.
Yeah, it's about a mustard company that's
a mustard
save the world.
Mustard tech.
Yeah. It's very good. People can people still I don't totally understand how Audible originals work. Can people still listen to it?
They can still listen to it. You have to have an Audible membership, but you can get 1 month free.
Okay.
Yeah, please listen. Yes, we must.
Yes, yeah. Or have parents who have an Audible account.
Yeah.
Don't
yes. Yeah, it doesn't have to be your own Audible account.
I think we'll wrap up there. Any last thoughts about Elizabeth Holmes or Theranos?
No, I think I said everything I have thought about Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos. Yeah.
Well, there you have it. And you have a book coming out May 3rd.
Yes, I'm more dateable than a plate of refried beans. You can pre-order it now.
Pre-orders are very important. So
yes, they are. They help a lot. Yeah.
So as Amanda Palmer would say, people like to give you things. So give me the gift of pre-ordering my book. Yeah. That I'm sure is very funny and will also give you gifts. And where can people follow you?
They can find me at Ginny Hogan _ on Instagram and Twitter.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah.
Rate and review the podcast wherever you're listening to it now. subscribe. Thanks again,
Cool.
Ginny.
Thanks so much for having me. This was so fun.